Hi, everybody. Nephew ad hoc UI meeting. All right, thanks everybody for joining. Yeah, excited to get some interest in helping out with the UI. This is really just a meeting to discuss like what we think needs to be done, where things are. Chris, I'm glad you were able to join. Ganesh and Sahir are from Samsung, I believe, and are interested in contributing potentially to the Nephew UI. So let me just explain where things are now. The Nephew UI, Chris took for our workshop back in November. He took the UI that he had already built for sort of our configuration as data suite, so for Porch really, and he adapted it for us for the workshop. So I can display. I didn't create an agenda, but I have a I can just display my
Wim, sorry, John, you are muted.
I was asking what is have you spent any time with this UI? Can you maybe give me an idea of? I know you mentioned you're more like me. You're not a UI person. You don't know how to build UIs, but you might be able to help with this. But Sahir is more of a UI engineer. Like what's the background? How do we want to proceed? Like I can talk about what we have. I can talk about what the plans are in the future roughly, but it's kind of all up in the air.
So the first thing we like to understand is the code architecture.
Okay.
And after that, what is expected from us?
Okay.
Yeah.
So just to add a little bit more context, John. So we already deployed these workshop, and Sahir has already been looking at this workshop repo and then the backstage UI and etc. So mostly at this stage, we would want to know for the release 1, how much of a change is expected on top of this existing UI. So depending on that, I think it would be better for us to make the call. Like it'll also help us make decision on how much time we have to spend and etc. And I as Sagir would mention, like he has a good hands-on on the React and JavaScript, as we mentioned on the document, but the backstage UI is something that we are still exploring.
Okay, so Chris has spent time with that, with the backstage and sort of the constraints, the boxes it puts you in, and things like that. So I'm sure he can help a lot with that. Let's start with the kind of plan. So there's a couple of things, and Chris I think has some time to give too. So basically, for R1, my expectation would be we remove some of these things for resources we are no longer using, like the package deployment controller and the 5G core topology controller aren't used any longer in R1, and we add the ability to edit. We add resource editors for package variant and package variant set. Beyond that, those are like the core things that if we do those, I think functionally we'll have enough to demonstrate. We can take a package that represents a topology and has multiple package variant sets within it. We could deploy it. We could watch its conditions resolve by what the package specialization teams do. We could edit the resources in it, before we publish it, so that we can. So if you go to Aravin's flow, right, he's got a topology controller. If we build a topology controller or take the existing one and tweak it, ideally we would build a resource editor for that resource too, or at least a viewer, which is sort of what we did in the workshop. We built a viewer for that equivalent resource. But barring that, even if we just start with a package that contains PVSs rather than a resource that creates them, the package machinery we already have a UI for. We can already select a package, inspect a package, deploy a package, edit a package. We don't have specific editors for package variant set. Really, we only need it for package variant set because the package variants are auto-generated or generated by, but we would want to be able to view them nicely. Did you have a question?
No, okay. No, John. Yeah, please.
Okay. So that would be one thing. So like I said, first thing is clean up and get rid of the stuff that's no longer relevant, which I believe is just those two editors. And then second thing is add support for package variant set. Those things would make it so that the user can go in, pick a topology package, use the UI to customize it a little bit if they want to, publish it, then it would get published to a repo that the management cluster is monitoring. The management cluster config sync on the management cluster would apply those resources to the management cluster, and so they'd show up. We need a resource viewer, I guess, for the package variant set. Like if you look at I don't know, I haven't spun up this UI, this system. Maybe I must have broken my system. But I don't know. That's actually, I hadn't thought about that. So I just took myself into another step. So this UI is focused on, yeah, Tal.
I wonder if I could interrupt the flow for a second.
Of course, absolutely.
So I think another thing needs to be done here, because there are some aspects here that are Porch UI, right? Basically, everything you mentioned right now is Porch UI. It's not Nefio UI specifically.
Exactly.
So I wonder if the right way to go with this is to actually separate this into two Backstage plugins. That is, one Backstage plugin, basically improve the current Porch UI and make it support the new Porch features. And then maybe work on a Nefio plugin that adds Nefio specific things to that. So it would be another pane, another click here on the left pane, right?
That's a really interesting idea. Like, so let me back up, because I got too detailed. You've got a great point here. Like my main point was, what's the minimum viable product to have a UI in R1? That's the things I said. What I would love to see is much more than that, right? I would love to see a Nefio specific UI. I don't know, again, how much time our contributors have to work on that. And I don't even know what it should look like. So Sal, I'd love if, like, go ahead.
I think, we could go for an MVP, but I would say that the MVP would actually be, let's not create an Nefio UI. Let's just make the Porch UI fully functional. That would be my suggestion, because
that's a fair. I mean, I would still want the branding. I just think it's more effective, but which we already have anyway. But that's fine. That's a reasonable way to put it.
But in the Porch UI, we don't get to see the package that is deployed, right? Like, for example, the topology of the package that's deployed on a specific edge cluster.
So Chris, if we actually disabled part of the Porch UI in this, because the Porch UI doesn't have an understanding of workload clusters. It has an understanding of, Chris, jump in and correct me if I say something wrong. So there actually is in the standard Porch UI, there's like another button here that says like deploy or create a sync. So it creates a sync, a config sync, a repo sync or something, and then it will show you the status of the sync into the management cluster. Is that right, Chris?
That's true. That's controlled by configuration. So it's nothing that we not code that we necessarily deleted. It's just something controlled by the config map with the UI.
Okay, but we don't display, like in this UI, we displayed like the deployed 5G core topologies, which we displayed out of the cluster, as opposed to a package. So it's a little bit, so we could do those things. And if we keep it at the level of resources and porch resources, it remains porch UI, like Tal was saying. If we build a topology controller, we certainly want to bring that to an FEO UI. If we want, I know there is a feature within Porch which I don't particularly like, called a remote root sync, but it's not, I don't particularly like the implementation of it, let's say. And it effectively is a resource you put in your management cluster that tells you how to install a root sync on a remote cluster. And so theoretically, we could use that for our bootstrapping if we have connectivity between management cluster and workload cluster, outbound from management cluster, which is not, in my opinion, the way normally.
Well,
I know we already do that with Watcher, right?
I continually ignore that in my workshop, but I guess my point is, I like where this is going. I don't think it's a big deal to have two plugins. I mean, the boilerplate code for both is pretty much the same, and we would still have the Nefio branding on the Nefio tab. But you know, we can decide which. Obviously, we're doing it from Nefio's perspective, so we would only implement those Porch features that we are using. So we can ignore stuff that we are not using for now, because that's up to the Porch team to fulfill. But if we make the Porch tab here, the Porch plugin, fully functional, and then add a Nefio plugin, which includes support for the seed code that Google provided for the NF topology, so that would be there. I feel like that is doable. I mean, honestly, that most of the work here is just bootstrapping and learning the environment. But once you get in, adding these features is not. I mean, it's a lot of copy and paste of code. I think we can do it.
Yeah, well, I can't say for the code. I mean, I know Chris is, it's not as simple as it always might seem, but so there's two questions we have to answer here, I guess, or two things we have to talk about. One is, how do we get the Porch UI completed, right? That like Tal was saying, which includes package variant set, which aren't even fully designed yet. Hopefully I'll have the API fixed next week on that, which is sufficient then to work on the UI. Then the second question is, do we have the resources and time to build the Nefio? I like your idea, Tal. I think it's a good idea. It's a separate tab for Nefio. And I don't know how linkages between these tabs work, Chris. Is there any linkage between different backstage tabs? Can you do that?
You can do that. I've read it. I haven't done it yet just because we only have one tab, but you can deep link between the two. So that is possible. So that could work out extremely well.
Okay, cool. And then there's the question of what we enable with respect to, or how we flesh out the Porch UI such that creating a sync it's clear it's going to be in the management cluster, or we even enable the creation of remote syncs.
So let me try to maybe add another principle that could help us save time here. So I do think we should have at least, this is a theme that I keep saying for R1, placeholders for things, even if they're not fully fleshed. So we could say that our initial goal for R1 release is just to have everything even just read only, right? Because obviously adding the editing of resources is the big complexity. So we can go as far as we have time for each feature. So I think it's more about listing the features and make sure, for example, just making sure that you can see all the package variants. Regarding editing them, etc., that's obviously far more advanced, right? So I think if we stick to a read-only principle, then it might be far easier to just have placeholders at least for everything. And then for R2, we can really flesh those features out more.
Yeah, I'd like to see editors for PVS at least, an editor for PVS at least within the scope of a package, not necessarily within the live cluster, because that enables the full flow from the UI. So I can clone the topology package. I can tweak it to my preferences. We already can, Chris, we can already edit just a YAML. So like if I have a CR that you don't have any CRD for, or you don't have any editor for, I can still edit it, right, as just a YAML.
That's correct, yes. And you said within a package, right? Within a deployment or blueprint package, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay, yes. Yeah, it's fully
Right,
supported.
so that's a good example of, just a straightforward solution we can have. Obviously, we would like a much richer UI that's, specific to package variant. But yeah, if just editing YAML could be enough just to make it functional, I think that could be a reasonable goal for R1.
Yeah. So Ganesh and Sahir, what do you think? Like, what we're sort of, here's the thing. Like, you asked, like, what do we need to do? Well, it's kind of up to us, right? There's no master plan here. This is, or maybe there is, but it's so vague that it is more or less meaningless. Like, there's a master plan if we want an FEO UI. Exactly what it looks like, I don't know. We could engage some of our end users in that, but we have a very tight timeline on R1. So my vision is get enough into the UI we have to support the overall flow from packages, and then if possible to support the overall flow with a topology controller from the seed code. If beyond that, like R2, 3, 4, we bust the doors wide open. We can continue with Backstage. We can not use Backstage. We can continue with the existing UI. I think there's real value in it. I think that would be wise, but we don't have to. Like, we can do anything, and it's kind of up to what we want and our end users want, and what we're able to what we're able to actually deliver.
Mm-hmm. Okay, John. We actually, before the meeting, me, Sahir, and Chandra is also here, who also has like GUI specific skill set, who's happy to contribute. I think the first thing from a design perspective, I think let's break down all the things that we would want: the editable, non-editable, package controller, specific views, and etc. And then with the help of Chris and etc., like as Sahir was already requesting, we would like to go through the architecture, see how the current workshop view flow works, and then like we would prioritize the task. Like for the R1, so it would be good to have these many set of features, but let's prioritize it so that Sahir and Chandra can take up as the flow comes in. So as much as possible, we would like to see how, based on the schedule, we like to see like what we can accommodate for the R1 scope. Like, but we can add all of them in the backlog. That all of them editable. Yeah. All of them, let's add it on the backlog. We'll see where it takes us. Like, because the Backstage itself is new. At this stage, I think we might also need help from you and Chris to understand the Backstage itself. So after we are in the flow, I think we could pick up multiple tasks.
Yeah, I think that would be from Chris. I'm clueless. So the other thing we should think about, and whether we, so what I'll do then is I booked this meeting for half an hour, and I want to be respectful. I know it's Friday night for you all. Like, I'm sure you're not thrilled to be doing this on Friday night. What we'll do is I'll take the action item to write up a doc, same process as we used for the other planning. I'll write up a short doc, 1-pager, just bullet points. Here's the features I think we need. We can all collaborate on that for a day or so, and then we'll translate those into backlog issues. I just think that's a little bit quicker than me creating the issues directly and us us iterating on them individually. And in the meantime, maybe we can set up another call for next week where I won't be there, but Chris maybe can take you all through the gory details of the technology, the way that he's leveraged Backstage and the way that he's been limited by Backstage. So what constraints he'd be working in, what his code, looks like, and does that sound reasonable?
Yes, John, that sounds reasonable. I would also like to add another point. Maybe maybe Sahir Chandra might add some other points with me. Like usually with the GUI development, the knowledge on the push and the knowledge on the controller, the topology controller, how much of knowledge do we have to have, so that we will like to internally discuss and get that, because in usually with the UI development we have a design draft and we have the sequence on what has to happen, and then we start our development. It's independent of how the backend works. So that's something that that information on that could also help us to internally discuss and educate more on Nephew, how much of Nephew level internal flow has to be learned for Sahir and Chandra. That would also be help us.
That's a good question. I think that probably understanding, like Chris can probably explain, okay, they have to know the concept of we have packages and repos in the life cycle. A package goes through, the user edits it, publish it, and those things. And then there's individual resource editors where you don't really have to know any of that. That's for the overall flow, right? If you want to understand the flow and what's happening, you need to know those things. But to create the package variant set or package variant editors directly, you probably don't need any of that. You need the API for that, which isn't defined yet, right? So right now, it's not like tomorrow they can sit down and do it, right? Because we have an API for package variant set, but it doesn't support all of the things that we need. So we're adding to it. There's also, Chris has done a little bit of at least exploration, if not work, in those areas as well. So it's good to know what's been done. So I don't think, excuse me, I don't think you need all the intimate details. I think when Chris was working on, he's pretty knowledgeable about all of it, but nonetheless, when he was working on it back in October, November, he didn't have a whole Nephew system set up. He just had repos and the UI, and that's all he needed, because it's more about the resources and editing those resources in the repos than it is about anything else. So you could do it just with GitHub and the UI itself. That's it, or Git here or whatever Git provider you have.
Yeah, that makes more sense. I think your earlier plan on preparing the backlog, and for each of the backlog, let's filter out how the UI should look, how the flow has to be. I think with the help of Chris, moving forward from next week, we can start putting together. Sahir or Chandra, you have. What do you think? You have any comments?
Yeah, it looks fine. First, we will ask we will make a setup. We will explore. We will have some experiments, and we will get back with questions about the flow.
Okay, I think a couple other things that are of interest we might want to think about. So in this installation via configuration, we explicitly use a service account. So basically, you don't have to authenticate. You just come in and you're acting as, I think, cluster admin, I think, Chris, isn't it? So authentication and authorization is configurable. You can set it up to use what's it called, OAuth for Google backed OAuth. And then I don't know, did we implement the Amazon backed or anything?
Not Amazon, no. We have a couple other options I can't think of off of the top of my head.
So those are, there are going to be bigger, the point I'm trying to raise is there are bigger things. I don't know that we care in R1 because it's still kind of prototypey in R1, but over the next couple releases, we need to think about how authentication and authorization work. We have a model that's there, but like it relies on, it works well when it's in, say, GKE, because GKE has common identities between your Kubernetes users in your GKE cluster and your authentication to Google authentication. But you know, and that maybe that's a limitation, like maybe we just say you have to have that, right? Which I think the major cloud providers do, but I don't know how that works, say, in an on-prem environment. So over time, we're gonna have to resolve a bunch of these more complex issues. So just
quick question. Is there a way to disable authentication entirely? I mean, I really struggled to set it up. And I ended up,
it is disabled in this entirely, right? Like anybody going to this UI is acting as, I think I sent you a link at some point, just too late in the, before your workshop.
Sorry, yeah. Oh, yeah, I remember now. It was too late. I didn't get to look.
There's a config option that basically says, don't require, I mean, effectively it's, yeah.
So I will humbly suggest that as part of what we're doing, we should have better documentation for the UI. It's just not all there.
Yeah, no, it's only been a work, it was only like
right.
Take it how we've configured it and don't touch that. So, all right, so that's great. I think we're at time. Really excited about this, appreciate it. We'll do that. Oh, before we go, what days, because I know the time zone differences, if you folks in IST and Chris are going to get together, what days and times work for both of you? It's probably faster to work it out now than over Slack or whatever.
John, can we get back on that? Is that okay? Because I also work with Vim, you know, like to create develop some of the functions as well. I kept functions. So if it's okay, like we'll internally, Sagir and Chandra will internally discuss and come. But the time is okay for you, right? It's not too early.
8 o'clock, Chris, does that work for you?
Yeah, this time's all right. Yes.
Okay. And then maybe the days, Sagir, you have any preference or you would like to get back?
No, I think this is fine for me actually. Maybe Chandra can also give his opinion. So how many times in a week we are planning to?
As I understand it right now, there's just sort of a bootstrapping, like you sit down with Chris for 30 or 60 minutes or however long you want, however many times you want to get up to speed. And after that, there wouldn't be a regular meeting outside of the regular meetings we already have scheduled for just tracking status. UI would be part of package management for some project. We would track the status there. And then, you know, you can reach out to Chris on Slack. Do you monitor the Slack at all, Chris, or can you monitor the Nefio Slack?
I can monitor it better. Yes, I do monitor it right now, but I could be a day behind, so I'll be more proactive.
So, or reach out to me, and I can always 4 out of 5 days a week. I'm literally sitting next to Chris when I'm at my desk, and so I can always just poke him and get his attention. So yeah, that's my thinking. So next week, whatever you guys, however much time you need, and you can get back offline, it's fine. I just figured it's good to at least know 8 o'clock's not too early for Chris, but it is too early for meetings at Google for the most part. Not entirely, because we have many time zones too, but I don't think typically Chris has 8 o'clock meetings, so it's probably fairly open for most days.
Yes.
Yeah.
This timing is okay for me anytime in the weekdays actually.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll just maybe have an internal discussion, and then like, and also I understand like next week there are a couple of holidays, and some of us are, having some holiday plans next week. Okay. So there's some local festival also in India. So we just will coordinate the time that all of us are here, and we'll have like you suggested. We did the same with Vim as well. So in the first couple of weeks we had multiple meetings, and over the time I think it got slowed down. But yeah, I think it's something that we would expect as well. Okay.
Okay.
Understood. Yeah. Thank you, Chris.
Awesome. Thank you for contributing. Are you all from Samsung? So Samsung's our UI team?
Yeah. No, we are like, so John, like I mentioned, like I am me and Saurabh and Shailendra, we are involved with developing kept functions. So
Okay.
when we shared our work of Nefio internally, like Sakir and Chandra also, we're happy to volunteer. So they're both UI experts. So they were happy to volunteer. And from the document I saw, like we were looking for some UI members for developing, and Chris had limited availability. So that's the backstory.
Oh, that's fantastic. Love it. I love it. I love it's really this is the great thing about open source, right? We can all, it's just incredible. People come together and do stuff. So that's what's going to make it happen. So really appreciate it. And and thanks, Tal and Ann, for joining. And obviously you're welcome to participate too. Aaron, do you have UI experience, or are you just curious?
We have UI experience.
Oh, I was asking
Around
about
3 years.
Sorry, Sahir. I know you guys do. I don't mean to. Yeah, I just.
Were you asking me?
Oh, I was just, you came today. I was curious if you were interested in contributing, because I just said Samsung's doing all this work, but I didn't want to leave you out, right?
No,
If
no.
you're interested in jumping in on the UI, I would love to have you involved as well.
No, I'm just tracking what's going on. The last time I did UI was 2003.
Okay. Yeah.
When JSP was still a thing.
Yeah. I hear you. Okay, awesome. I don't want to keep you all any later. Thanks so much. And yeah, Ganesh, just reach out to me or Chris directly on Slack to coordinate the time for next week.
Yep, sounds good.
I can set up the meetings, so we keep them open meetings. I'll set them up on Zoom. Just let me know when, and we'll be set. Okay.
Yeah, sounds good. Sounds good. Yes.
Thanks all. Yep. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, everyone. Happy
Bye.
weekend. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Bye.